I just filmed this whole intro and realised that I wasn't actually filming. The intro was basically just explaining that I'm ill, so if I'm a bit out of it, that's why, and I think that really proved my point. I should have filmed this video in December 2020. It is the 20th of April 2023, but we are finally getting here. I was waiting for a good time to do it. This is the best we're gonna get, clearly. Just like slightly ill, a bit out of it, very tired. I didn't quite realise how tired I was until I started talking. I'm pretty tired. Let's get on with it. This is what I read in 2022. Just for some context, I stopped giving starred reviews last year. I have mixed feelings about starred reviews because, I don't know, it just feels really straightforward. I'm gonna give you whether or not I remember if I enjoyed them or not, because I didn't write reviews. This year I have been doing them, but I might not do them for every book. Okay, I'm gonna ignore my notes. I'm gonna use Storygraph instead, because it's probably gonna be more accurate. Because according to this, I read 33 books last year, and according to my notes, I only read 31, so we're gonna go off this. So I read 33 books last year. Let's have a look at what they were. So I read 9 print books, which makes much more sense to me. 4 books don't have a format. What were those ones? So the 4 books that are unformatted on this list are Horrible Histories, Gruesome Guides, York, which I read in between shifts at work. It never came to my house, and that was a physical copy of that book. It was good. It wasn't very accurate, but it was fun. Doctor Who and the Cricket Men, anything Doctor Who and Douglas Adams, I'm gonna absolutely love, so I really enjoyed this. That was also a physical book. I read an ARC, which I'm not gonna tell you about. ARC is Advanced Reader Copy. In this case, it wasn't quite an ARC, it was a first draft. I will say no more about that. And then Incredible Women in History, which was an audiobook that I listened to, which was not very good. So back to the ones that have editions on Storygraph. I read Pieces of Justice by Margaret York. This was actually for a book circle, which ended up sort of falling apart a little bit. This is the second book circle I've done, and the second one that didn't turn out well. But the idea in a book circle is that you all pick a book and you read it and you annotate it and then you pass it on to the next person, and then it all goes round and then you get your book back and it's been annotated by all the people in the group. And it's great when it works. I've done 2 of them now, both of them didn't work. If you're interested in doing one, let me know, because I think they're great fun, but hasn't worked out for me yet. The Heavens by Sandra Newman. I remember almost nothing about this, so it probably wasn't the best. The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. Absolutely loved this. It was very, very good. I cannot wait to read the next one. Halloween Party by Agatha Christie. This is the only Agatha Christie. The only Agatha Christie that I've read that isn't her non-fiction. This is the only fiction I've read by her. That's a better way to do this sentence. It was okay. It's not really my thing, to be honest, but it was also for the book circle. And then Searching for the Amazons, The Real Warrior Women of the Ancient World. So I enjoyed this. It was a bit like reading through sludge sometimes, you know, when books are just really like dense, you know, but it doesn't mean it's not enjoyable, it's just going to be difficult to read. I assumed all the way through that this was written by a woman. I can't explain to you, it just really had written by a woman vibes, but it's written by the John Mann, which is the most like white man name ever. John Mann. It almost sounds like a joke. Anyway, it was quite good. So print made up 27% of my books last year, and then audio made up 73, and that was 24 audiobooks. So I read Lyra's Oxford, which is one of the spin-offs from the His Dark Materials series. I didn't massively like the His Dark Materials series. I think I probably would have preferred it when I was younger. Maybe it's just the audiobook. I struggle with fantasy in audiobooks. I don't know why. It's just, I don't know, I just can't get into them as much. I really like reading it, but for some reason listening to it just don't do my brain. But for example, autobiographies, hate reading, love listening to the audiobooks, so there you go. And then I listened to the hexagonal phase of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. This is not one of the ones that Douglas Adams wrote. It's like material that he wrote before he died. It's been put together into one of the many, many versions of The Hitchhiker's Guide you can listen to. Dearly, new poems by Margaret Atwood. I remember nothing about this. It was less than 2 hours long. How the King of Elfheim Learned to Hate Stories. I also remember nothing about this. I did listen to all of the Folk of the Air series last year though, so I'll get back to that. But yeah, I remember almost nothing about that, so it clearly didn't have a lasting impact. Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. This was not only probably my favourite audiobook of the year, one of the best sci-fi novels I've ever read / listened to. If you are going to read this, I highly recommend it. Not just that, I would recommend listening to the audiobook. A lot of this has to do with language and communication, and I think some of that will be lost if you're reading it as a book. I haven't read it as a book, so I don't know, but if you're between the two, I would recommend the audiobook. It is, however, 16 hours long, so it's a chunky one. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, of course. There's always going to be some Douglas Adams in here. I wonder if there's a year where there isn't any. I should go back and have a look. If there's any years where I haven't read any Douglas Adams. I doubt it. You Love Me, which is the third in the You series that's on Netflix. I've really enjoyed these. Once again, I would recommend listening to the audiobooks. I haven't read the physical books, but the thing about these is that because it's like all internal monologue, there's something so vivid and something so creepy about hearing him say it. It's almost as if his voice is inside your head, and I think there would be something lost in an actual book. Six of Crows, the first book in that series by Leigh Bardugo. I have read it before. I was listening to the audiobook. It is not my favourite of Leigh Bardugo's books. I know it's a controversial opinion because everyone seems to like it, but here we are. Storygraphers put this in the most random order. I don't know why, so sorry about that. Because the next one on here is Siege and Storm, which is the second book in the Shadow and Bone series, and I did not read this in this order. I absolutely love the Shadow and Bone series. It's been ages since I read it, so I didn't know if it would hold up on audiobook. It absolutely does. I also read it when I was like younger, and I thought maybe again it wouldn't hold up now that I am not a fully fledged adult, but more of an adult than I was like 5 years ago. Longer than that. When did I read that series? It was a while ago. But it is still just as good. Yeah. I just really like fantasy. Keep Calm and Trust the Science by Luke O'Neill. I just like any like casual, not too graphic medical audiobooks. That's a really specific niche, but I've listened to quite a few of them now. Evernight by Ross Mackenzie. Is that how you say that? Ross Mackenzie? Yeah, the first in the Evernight duology. I think there's 2 of them. Didn't really enjoy it. Sorry, it wasn't really my thing. Maybe I just don't like fantasy and audiobooks, but yeah, wasn't a massive fan. Fry's Ties by Stephen Fry. This was I don't know, like a kind of quirky book. It goes through Stephen Fry's tie collection and tells you the story about all of them. It's a bit more interesting than it sounds. It's not way more interesting than it sounds. It still wasn't that great. Little Me, My Life from A to Z by Matt Lucas. I really enjoyed this. It's also narrated by him, which is always nice. Disability Visibility by Alice Wong. First person stories. Why is this so tiny? First person stories from the 21st century. Yeah, so it's about like people's experience with disability. I don't really want to give this like a review because there's so much I could go onto it, but in terms of how much I enjoyed it, it was like fine. But yeah, this doesn't feel like a book that I can like review, you know? The Queen of Nothing by Holly Black, which is the 3rd book in the Folk of the Air series. This is what I mean by this being in the most random order. I quite enjoyed the Folk of the Air series in general. I haven't read it before, and I definitely think it suffered from that, because as aforementioned, I don't like listening to fantasy as much. So I didn't enjoy it as much as the fantasy that was a reread, or I guess a re-listen. But I did enjoy it. Possibly I should have saved it for reading it though. But like, I was never going to get around to reading it, let's be honest. There's so many books. I might as well just listen to it. The Stonewall Reader, which is like by a whole bunch of people but was published by the New York Public Library. It was a bit depressing. but also kind of interesting. It's an interesting part of queer history. Goodnight Stories for Rebel Girls. This was very problematic. I did not enjoy it. City of Bones by Cassandra Clare. I enjoyed this, but once again, it's a fantasy that I've already read, so... The Miniaturist by Jessie Burton. I had high expectations for this. It didn't meet any of them. Nothing much really happened. The Miniaturist had very little to do with the actual plot. Gotta get through this. Another book by Louis Theroux. He's great. I've read both of his books, well, listened to both of his books now. I really like Louis Theroux. Ruin and Rising, the third book in the Shadow and Bone series. Really like the Shadow and Bone series. Not much else to say there. The Wicked King, The Folk in the Air, book 2. Already covered The Folk in the Air. No One is Too Small to Make a Difference by Greta, is it Thunberg? By her. You know who I mean. And then Shadow and Bone, number 1, which we've already covered, which equates to 9,496 pages. I think it counts audiobooks by pages as well. I'm not sure. The most common mood of my books was adventurous. That came up in 17 of the books, followed by informative, which was 8, and then funny, which was 8 again. Most of the books that I read, 50% were medium paced, 20% were slow, 30% were fast. 63% fiction, 38% non-fiction. Top 3 genres are exactly what I probably predict them to be: YA, fantasy and sci-fi. Bottom 3 are autobiography, crime and essays. But that doesn't mean that they're the least that I listen to. The least that I read, because they're still on the board. My most read author was Leigh Bardugo with 4, followed by Douglas Adams, which was 3, and Holly Black, which was 3. So that is what I read last year. This video is long overdue, but if you're interested in what I'm reading this year, stay tuned. The video will be coming a lot sooner than the gap that we normally get. Did that make sense? You knew what I meant. If you read any of these books, let me know what you thought. I can go into a lot more detail about some of them. Some of them I don't remember, but some of them I can do a bit more of a review about, so if you're interested in any of them, leave me a comment. I'll tell you a bit more about what I thought. Anyway, okay, if you have any requests or questions, leave them down in the comments. New videos every Wednesday. Like and subscribe and all that jazz, and I will see you whenever the next video is.